Hello, quilty friends. It's Stacy from Stacy Creates Stuff, and I am back with our next block of the week as part of my ongoing Patching the Hole in the Barn Door series. It's time for block number 5. In preparing this week's block, I realized I forgot to read the poem for last week. So, just a quick refresher. Last week's block, The Grandmother's Flower Garden, with English paper piecing. Let me read last week's poem, and then I will read this week's. Tomorrow to the field we'll go, and Papa will us pardon, for we shall fix that barn door hole with flowers from Grandmother's garden. And this week's poem. The lovely flowers will surely fade. The ladies were growing tense. Perhaps we could use an old signpost, or better yet, a rail fence. That's right. This week's block is the rail fence. Another one of my favorite blocks. It's quick, it's easy. Whew. After last week's English paper piecing hexy adventure. Simple little rectangles. And as a matter of fact, it's even simpler when you start out with strips. So let's get going. These are the 3 fabrics that I have chosen for this block. You do need 3 fabrics, and we're going to cut some strips. I promise after last week's block, this one is super easy. I'm going to cut a 1.5 inch strip from my turquoise here. And ideally, if you can get a 14-inch long piece, that is great. So I can out of this. And out of my green, I am also able to get a 14-inch piece. So I will cut let me square that up first. Then I will cut a 1.5 inch strip. And then from my pink, I do have a piece that is long enough. It's actually quite long, but I don't really want to take off a long length of that. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and cut off 2 1.5 inch strips. That'll be plenty, and I'll have a little bit left over. I am ambidextrous with my rotary cutter, so I don't have to keep flipping my fabric around. All right. So for this block, I'm going to sew the 3 strips together, and you can decide what order you want them to go. And I think I'm going to go ahead and cut my green strip in half. I know it's a little more than 7 inches. So that will be perfect. There we go. Ultimately, we are going to be having a 3.5 inch strip, and we're going to make a 3.5 inch square block from these 3 strips. And so that's why I just need to make sure I have 7 inches. Oh, I don't need to trim that one. So, and you want, if you have multiple sets of strips, if you weren't able to cut full 14-inch lengths from all of your pieces, then you want to make sure that you have the same order of fabrics. So I have at least a 7-inch strip, so I know I'll be able to get 2 blocks out of this. If you really only have bits and pieces, then you can cut 1.5 by 3.5 inch and sew those together. You'll need a total of 4 blocks. So I have 2 sets here. Each will make 2 blocks. Let's get sewing. All right, I am back with my strips sewn together. Again, you may be lucky enough to have one long strip that's at least 14 inches. You may have 2, you may even have 4. All that matters is that in the end, you're able to get a total of 4 3.5-inch square blocks. So I'm going to grab my smaller ruler here, square up the end of one of my strips, and then trim this to 3.5 inches. There's one. I should be able to get another one out. Set those aside. Do the same to this strip. All right, with all 4 blocks, I'm now going to arrange them. So 2 of them will have horizontal stripes, and 2 of them will have vertical. And you can arrange them in different ways. So this is a traditional way, and it ends up making a little bit of a zigzag, which is kind of fun. There's a prominent pink zigzag here and a turquoise one. But you can play around with different means. Let's see. You can arrange them something like this, where it makes sort of a exploding cross there. So whichever way you want to put them together, you can. And the instructions, which are available through my email list, will give you some alternatives. Now I'm going to be placing this block next to a yellow frame. So I think the blue in the center there is going to be kind of nice. These get sewn together in rows, and then the rows get sewn together to make the block. Off to the sewing machine. I'll be right back. But first, even though I know that they are 3.5 inches in this direction, I need to trim them down just a little bit off the edges here. And that is because my seams are apparently a very scant 1/4 of an inch. And my block is a little bit wider than I need it to be. Much better. Here is our finished block, and at this point you can square it up or check to see that it is 6.5 inches square, and mine is looking pretty good. So let's sew this block together. I wanted to take a moment to show you another way you can square up those half square triangles that we use in the frame part of the block, and that is using try to get the glare out there, a 8-inch by a square ruler or other similar type ruler. So this has a nice strong diagonal. If I turn it the correct way, these corner pieces on the frame part of the block need to be cut down to 3.5 inches. So I just place that diagonal line so that it is along the seam, and then I'm making sure that I am past the 3.5 inch mark on both this side of the ruler and this side. And then I can just trim 2 sides at once, makes it super simple. Turn that square around. Now I definitely need to make sure that the edge here lines up at the 3.5 inch mark. Still have that diagonal on the seam line. And we have a perfect 3.5 inch half square triangle. I'm going to do the same for all the rest, and these will be ready for the frame of my block. Here we go, our finished block. It is so bright and cheery. I love it. I'm just going to grab my 12.5 inch square ruler and square it up, and we'll be all done this block. And here we have our finished block. I love it. It's bright. It's cheery. It's patching that hole in the barn door. If you would like the instructions for this block and all of our previous, plus the ones yet to come for patching the hole in the barn door, then join my email list. I'll leave a link in the description below. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing. I adventure into quilting, cross stitch, eventually knitting. Longtime knitter, just haven't done much knitting on the channel. And embroidery, well, just if it's a fiber art, I want to get involved with it. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, and it really helps me to reach more people like you. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Next week, I will be back with block number 6. That's right, we are almost halfway through. In the end, I will be showing you at least 3 different ways to set the blocks. Everything from a lap size up to a queen. Between this week's video and next week's, who knows? There may be a floss tube. There may be some tutorials. Subscribe and find out. Until next time, I'm Stacy. Bye.